Okay, so I'm working on a Honda Accord 2005, but I will put a list of the vehicles that it actually covers down below. This is a Honda V6 J Series, so this might be similar to some of your Pilots, TLs, CLs, MDX, some of your Ridgelines, possibly. So here I'm just jacking up the front of the vehicle. I only do one side because the other side is exactly the same. There's no reason to show you both sides when they're both the same. So there is a little steel rail back there that I put the jack on. It's actually a pinch point. That's the only place you should put a jack, otherwise you could damage your fender. We're going to be doing the front brakes on this and the rotors. We're actually going to be changing out the rotors because the rotors are too thin. They can't be surfaced anymore. I'll put a link in the description below where I go over resurfacing and what it's all about. We're going to be upgrading the rotors to cross-drilled and slotted. And I got them from a great parts store, ACR Automotive in Riverside, California. Lug nuts are 19 millimeter. So just getting the wheel off, 19 millimeter. Actually, first thing you want to do is loosen up the lug nuts, then jack up the vehicle, and then take off the lug nuts all the way. So I've got the wheel off. Always use a jack stand when you're working on the vehicle. Next thing we need to do is take off the cap for the brake fluid reservoir. When you push back the brake pallet or the pistons for the brake calipers, it pushes this fluid back up into the reservoir itself, and you don't want it to overfill and blow out a seal inside there. So I take that cap off, and then as the fluid comes up, I'll put a rag around it and catch any fluid that comes off. If you do get brake fluid out onto the vehicle or on the engine, just get a hose it down with some water. Obviously put the cap back onto the reservoir and then hose it off because water eats brake fluid. So right here I'm showing you there's two screws, JIS screws that hold in the rotor. What I'll usually do, or what I've done, it's pretty successful for me, is get a screwdriver, a number 2 screwdriver, and the steel shank goes all the way through the screwdriver. I bought them from Harbor Freight. I'll put some links in the description below. But as you put the screwdriver into the screw, you take a hammer and you hit the hammer. You hit the screwdriver, and at the same time you're obviously trying to get the screw out counterclockwise. So you'll see me do this here in a second. It's helped a lot. And if it doesn't work, you can always use some heat, try some penetrating oil, or if last resort, you can always drill it out as well. But it usually works pretty well to do it this way. Just take your time, do it slowly. You don't want to strip out that screw and have it stuck in there, because it's more of a hassle than anything if it does get stuck in there. I also, when I put the new rotor on, or any rotor, if it's the old rotor, I also put the screws back in to make it easier to hold the rotor in place when I'm putting the brake caliper bracket on and the caliper back on. It's also a good idea to put something below the the area where you're working, because when brake dust goes into liquid form, it makes a big old mess. And I like to spray off the rotor, the caliper, old brake pads, get all the old brake dust off, because you don't want to breathe it in. So in the back there's two 14 millimeter bolts. They're actually slide pins. Sometimes they're in there really, really hard. So I'll get a wrench, 14 millimeter wrench, obviously put it on there, and then get a hammer. If I can't hit it up with the palm of my hand, I'll get a hammer. Not use the head, but use the area right, below right before the metal part, and hit the wrench to break the bolt loose. You can see that's what I'm attempting to try to do right there. So just get those out. Now the caliper's coming out. Just place it on top. Don't let it hang on from the brake line. And there's the caliper slide pin right there. I'm going to take those out, re-grease them. I usually use Permatex synthetic grease. Put some links in the description below to where you can pick that up on Amazon. Big bottle, small bottle. If you're only doing this brake job once, you might want to just get the small bottle. And then right there, trying to get the brake caliper bracket off. So you have to get that off to get the rotor out. It's a 17 millimeter. Two 17 millimeters are back there. I switch between half-inch breaker bar as well as a 3/8 ratchet. Just trying to get off. I used a hammer as well to break it free and clear. When you do go back to reinstall these, it's a good idea to torque them down to 100 foot-pounds. You don't want the brake caliper bracket coming off by any means. You don't need to use the Loctite or anything, but just make sure that it's in there tight. I usually put them down to 100 foot-pounds. This job really isn't that hard at all. Just more time consuming than anything. You can buy the parts on Amazon, save yourself some money. I know shops usually like to charge an arm and a leg to do this job. I don't know why. It's gravy. I mean, it's an easy job to do. So when a brake job goes into a shop, they just think it's gravy. Gravy means an easy job that pays a lot. So I'm just showing you the old brake pads here. They're really, really worn down. Barely any material left of those at all. Okay, so sometimes the rotor gets stuck onto the hub. What you have to do to get it off is hit it with a hammer. If I wasn't replacing these, I'd be a little bit more careful. I'd hit the rotor in between the studs. But here I'm just hitting the outside of the rotor, just using brute force to get this thing off. You'll feel it when it actually pops loose. So here I'm just showing you that if you wanted to save the rotor, if you're going to resurface the rotor and use it again, just hit it between the studs. So I got it free. Now if you guys wanted to, you could grind that rust away off the hub and then put some anti-seize that sits between the hub and the rotor. So just placing a new rotor on, getting the 2 screws I pulled out to hold it in place while I put everything back on. It makes it so much easier if that rotor is in place. If you lose those screws or you end up drilling them out, you can always go to AutoZone or O'Reilly's, pick up a new set, a couple bucks. So here I just took the caliper to the bench, just pulling out the old brake pads. So some brake pad kits come with new hardware, some don't. If they do come with new hardware, go ahead and replace it. You'll also need to clean everything up with some brake cleaner. You'll clean this where the brake pad slides on the caliper. You actually need to clean that off of any old grease or brake dust or grime or dirt. And then with the slide pins as well, you're going to go ahead, spray down with brake cleaner and clean all that up, and then put some Permatex synthetic lube on there. I'll put a picture of it right now. But just take your time. Make sure you don't put the brake pads in backwards. I've seen that happen, and then you go to drive the vehicle, and it just makes a big old screeching sound. It's not a lot to this. It's really, very easy. I'm just cleaning everything up here. Some brake pad kits come with new hardware, some don't. If it doesn't come with new hardware for you, go ahead and reuse the old stuff. Clean up the old hardware as best as possible, and then put it back in. I also put a link in the description below of a video I did on the caliper slide pins itself. Sometimes they come with a little rubber piece at the end. If somebody uses the wrong grease on those, that little rubber piece will actually swell up, and it won't come out of the brake caliper at all. It'll be seized in there, which makes it a pain in the butt. But I always cut those off. If a caliper slide pin has one of those, if it has rubber on the end, I'll just go ahead, I'll cut it off. Not have to worry about that anymore. I've done it on countless vehicles. I've never had someone come back and say, you know what, my brakes don't work because you cut off the little rubber piece on my caliper slide pin. I'll put a link in the description below to the video I did about that. So just lubing up the caliper slide pin. You're going to lube the top and the bottom. Then you're going to lube the the hardware that the brake pads slide on as well. And just make sure that once you get everything installed back into place, like right there, just make sure those pins are sliding freely in and out. So just taking some Permatex right there and just putting on the hardware. It's where the brake pads slide on the bracket itself, top and bottom, inside and out, on both the driver's side and the passenger side. All right, so the brake caliper is ready to go. I've had really good success with Bosch QuietCast brake pads. Put some links in the description below to Bosch QuietCast brake pads down in the description below. It comes with everything you need. Some of the brake pads comes with the hardware. Okay, so I'm back at the car, and one thing you need to do with the caliper, there's a piston inside the caliper, and that piston actually comes out. That's what the brake fluid is. That's what the brake fluid does. It actually pushes out the caliper piston, and engages the brake pads to actually engage onto the rotor, and that's what stops you. So that piston comes out and you have to push that piston back in. The way I do that is with a 6-inch C-clamp and slowly turning it back into place. That's why I took off the brake reservoir cap, so that when fluid comes back into the reservoir, if it overspills, it doesn't blow out a seal, because on the very top of that cap there's a rubber seal. You don't want that hurting the seal on the cap, and if anything comes out, if you put a rag up there, it'll catch it. Like I said earlier, if it gets on anything or it gets on the engine, just get some water, wash it off with water. There's no need to open up the bleed screw on the caliper itself. I know a lot of YouTubers show themselves doing that. Don't do that. Do not do that. There's no reason to. If you change out the caliper and needed to bleed air out of the system, that's when you would do that. But just because you're pushing the caliper piston back into place, don't open that. Don't open that bleed screw. You're just opening yourself up to a can of worms that you don't want to deal with. You get air. You could possibly get air in the system. I know a lot of guys say to do it. Chris Fix. I don't think Eric the Guard guy says it. Who's that other guy that says it? Humble Mechanic says to do it. Don't do it. Don't open up the bleed screw when you push the piston back in. I've been doing brake jobs for 3 decades now, and never done it. Never had any issues with it. So don't do it. The rest is pretty self-explanatory. Just bring in your brake caliper bracket back into place. Put those 17mm bolts back in. You're going to torque them down to 100 foot-pounds. And then you're going to put the caliper back in. You're going to install the new brake pads. And then this is critical, before you drive the vehicle, before you go anywhere, take the cap for the brake fluid reservoir, put that on, go into your vehicle, before starting the engine, press the brake pedal 10 times. Because the piston has to come back out and make contact with the new brake pads. And if you don't do that, you're going to go to drive your vehicle and you're not going to have any brakes. So always do brake pads in a pair. Do the driver's side, do the passenger side. And then once you get done with that, go ahead, jump in your vehicle, don't start it, press the brake pedal 10 times. I hope, guys, that this has helped you out. If you can, please subscribe. And like always, I'll keep them rolling for you.